pace throbbed like a living heartbeat inside the crowded nightclub. Colored lights washed over the dance floor, painting the crowd in pulses of crimson, blue, and gold. Glasses clinked at the bar, laughter rolled like waves through the smoky air, and the DJ's voice blended into the hypnotic rhythm that made the building tremble. Among the crowd was Amber Lewis, a 22-year-old student with long dark hair that shimmered under the strobe lights. She had come here with two friends to celebrate the end of exams, but by now both friends had vanished into the crowd, lost to their own adventures. Amber didn't mind. She enjoyed dancing alone, letting the music pull her out of herself, wrapping her in its loud, safe cocoon. But as the night crept past midnight, exhaustion tugged at her body. Sweat clung to her neck, and her feet ached in her heels. She decided it was time to leave. With a polite smile to the bartender, she grabbed her purse, checked her phone, and made her way toward the exit. Outside, the sudden silence struck her first. The muffled beat of the club lingered faintly behind her, but beyond that lay the heavy, humid air of a Florida night, the kind of heat that never lifted, even in darkness. The streets were slick from a recent rainstorm, glowing with reflections of neon signs. Somewhere in the distance, cicadas hummed, and the croak of frogs floated in from unseen pools. Amber paused to take a deep breath, savoring the relief of fresh air after hours of smoke and sweat. She pulled her car keys from her purse and walked across the mostly empty parking lot. Her heels clicked on the wet asphalt. It should have been an ordinary moment, the end of an ordinary night. But already she had the sense that someone or something was watching. Amber unlocked the sedan with a chirp and slid behind the wheel, grateful for the pocket of cool air still trapped inside. She tossed her purse into the passenger seat, wiped the fog from the rearview mirror with her thumb, and started the engine. The radio came alive softly, late-night jazz from a station in Little Havana, something human to counter the hush. She pulled out of the lot and let the city fall behind her in slices, shuttered bodegas, sodium lamps puddling on wet sidewalks, a stray cat perched on an air conditioner like a gargoyle. The farther she drove, the more Miami thinned into wide lanes and dark margins. Palms leaned over the roadway like eavesdropping giants. A billboard flashed past with a half-smiled dentist, promising miracles at dawn. Her phone buzzed. "Maya, you okay?" "Where'd you go?" Amber thumbed back at a stoplight, heading home. "All good. Call you tomorrow." A second buzz, the battery icon already red. She dropped the phone into the cup holder and kept moving. Rain returned in a whisper, more mist than storm, a breath across the windshield that made the world milky and close. Amber flicked the wipers. The blade squeaked, then settled into a tired rhythm. To her right, a drainage canal ran black as an open mouth. It paralleled the road for a while, catching glimmers of streetlight like scales on a sleeping fish. A frog croaked, then another. A staggered duet that seemed too slow, too deliberate. She turned down the radio. The sound didn't stop. If anything, it followed, just beyond the glass, in step with the car. Rup, rup, deep, resonant, almost amused. "Get a grip," she muttered, and rolled the volume back up. At the edge of the city, where neon died and the road gave itself over to darkness, she passed a gas station with the lights off and the pumps bagged in yellow plastic. A single tube light inside the convenience store flickered like a failing heartbeat. She considered pulling in anyway. Bathroom, water, a moment to shake off the prickling at the back of her neck, but something about the emptiness made her foot stay on the accelerator. The causeway ahead was a ribbon over low water and marsh. On both sides, the wetland breathed, sawgrass stretching into forever, pools polished flat as glass, and the suggestion of movement in the periphery, as if the landscape itself shifted when you weren't looking. She lowered her window an inch to clear the fog. Night rushed in, warm, metallic, and alive with insect wings. Her headlights picked up a drift of mist rolling across the asphalt. The car cut through it like paper, and for a heartbeat, the beams made a tunnel, a pale ring, a world inside a world. Something was standing at the far edge of it. No, only a stake, a mile marker leaning. No, a hunched shape that melted when she blinked. Amber swallowed. Don't spook yourself. On the median, a toppled sign read, "Flood Area," in reflective letters crazed by cracks. The canal swung closer again, almost brushing the shoulder. Water dropped out of sight there, a concrete culvert yawning into shadow. The croak came again. Rrrup. Closer this time. It had weight to it, chest deep and wet, like air forced through a throat not designed for speech. She checked the rear view. Empty road behind. When she looked forward again, the headlights caught a scatter of palm fronds across the lane. Storm debris. She braked, tires whispering on wet asphalt, and eased around the pile. The steering wheel trembled under her fingers, a faint vibration that traveled into her wrists and wouldn't quite leave. A shape moved in the canal, a bulge of water pushing against itself, then subsiding. Nothing. Probably a gator, cruising the edge. It was Florida. There were always gators. She reminded herself of the statistics, of how rarely they bothered people. Still, the thought of eyes just below the surface, pacing her, drew the skin tighter across her arms. The radio cut to static, a blurred wash like breathing. She flipped stations. Half caught a preacher warning night owls to flee temptation, half caught a ball game, Cuban accents, a crack of a bat far away in time, half caught nothing. She turned it off entirely and let the car be a small ship in a large sea. A new sound entered, soft, irregular taps, like fingertips on the roof. Not rain. It came in 3, then silence. 3 again. She increased her speed, and the tapping matched it, then vanished. Above, the cloud layer broke just long enough to show a swipe of moon, pale and lidless. Her phone lit once more without buzzing, battery at 3%, and a notification bloomed. "Amber, are you still driving?" From her mother's favorites list, a message she hadn't opened. She stared at it too long. The tires hummed across the center rumble strip, and the steering wheel shivered a warning. She corrected, breath catching. "Almost home," she said, as if the car needed reassurance. A mile marker reflected back. 42. She didn't remember the last one. She didn't remember the road bending here either. Had she missed the exit? Her GPS would have told her if the phone weren't dying. A blue sign promised a rest area in 2 miles. She decided to stop there, wash her face, breathe, figure out if she needed to double back. The mist thickened, becoming a low-lying fog that hugged the asphalt. Headlights carved shallow bowls of visibility. In that milky light, the first of the footprints appeared. She almost missed them. Dark ovals on the right shoulder, glistening where water pooled in their centers. They weren't boot prints. They weren't tire scuffs. They were wider at the toes, narrowing toward the heel, splayed as if from webbing. 5, then 6, each one fresh, the edges clean, leading from the canal up onto the road, and then vanishing, as if the owner had stepped into the air. Amber's scalp tightened. She told herself they were bird traces, exaggerated by rain or overlapping dog tracks. She told herself anything that let her keep rolling. But when the next set appeared, larger and deeper, tracking with the shoulder instead of across it, something cold settled between her ribs. Each print had a faint ridge at the front, a crescent like a claw mark. The croak came in answer, not from the canal now, from the guardrail. She braked without meaning to, and the seatbelt locked across her chest. The car rocked to a stop, idling. In the silence that followed, she could hear the insects again, the soft hiss of marsh grass, the tick of the cooling engine, and underneath it, wet breath. Slow, patient, Amber leaned forward and peered over the hood. The fog had gathered in sheets, forming a pale wall a few car lengths ahead. Within it, something tall shifted its weight. The shape separated from the mist and stood on the shoulder, half turned away, as if deciding whether to face her. The shine of the headlights slicked across skin that wasn't skin, green-brown, pebbled, beaded with water. A head, too wide at the mouth, with a line of lip that bulged and then sank, folding heavy over a jaw. The eye that caught the light was a coin, amber ringed with black. The thing blinked, sideways, a thin membrane sliding over the eye and back. Amber's hands found the wheel without her telling them to. She reversed, tires chattering on the wet, then swung the car back into the lane. The shape didn't rush her. It only adjusted one step, then another, the movement wrong in a way her body recognized before her mind did. Too much spring, too much control in the knees, as if gravity were negotiable. She pressed the accelerator. The car surged. In the mirror, the fog swallowed the shoulder, then the guardrail, then the thing entirely. For a few seconds, she let herself believe she'd imagined it. A sign rose out of the mist. Rest area, 1/2 mile. The lights there were on, haloed and inviting. A handful of cars sat under the lamps, security cameras like small glass eyes at the corners of the building. People, she whispered. Good. She took the exit. The ramp curved down, deeper into fog. The croak followed, softer now, almost a chuckle, as the canal ran parallel one last time and opened its dark mouth beneath the concrete. When her tires hit the lot, the tapping returned on the roof. 3 quick knocks, then stillness, like knuckles politely finding a door. Amber parked under the brightest lamp she could find, throat tight, fingers numb on the key. She listened. The engine ticked. The insects sang. And from the edge of the lot, where the marsh met the light, something rose, then sank, lifting a lace of weeds as if they were curtains. She locked the car. The fog pressed its face to the glass and breathed. Far beyond the bathrooms, past the vending machines and the map of Florida, sun faded to pink, A narrow service road slipped into the wetlands, unmarked. That was where the footprints went. The rest area's lights hummed like trapped insects. Sodium lamps threw pale halos across wet concrete, turning puddles into tiny mirrors that trembled whenever a truck sighed by on the highway. Amber sat a beat longer with both hands on the wheel, letting her pulse slow until it felt like it belonged to her again. Nothing tapped. Nothing breathed except her. She popped the locks, cracked the door, and slid out fast, keys between her fingers the way her mother had taught her. The night folded around her in a warm, damp press, the kind of heat that had a taste, metallic and green. The restroom building sat ahead, low and beige, its cinder blocks slick with condensation. A drink machine blinked an offline message in blue, as if it too was holding its breath. She forced herself toward the light. Inside, the fluorescent bulbs were too bright, too clean. A janitor's cart huddled by the sinks, yellow bucket, mop gone gray with the world. Someone had left the water dripping in the far basin. Each drop hit the metal drain with a sound like a slow clock. Amber met her own eyes in the mirror and flinched at the stranger there. Mascara smudged, hair frizzed by fog, mouth pinched tight to keep panic from spilling out. "Get it together," she said, and the mirror said it back. She turned on the tap, splashed her face, and let the shock of cold run her thoughts into order. Highway. Phone nearly dead. Exit missed. She'd check the wall map, reset her bearings, and get back on the road. In the morning, she could laugh about swamp hallucinations and bad lighting. When she killed the faucet, the room fell into a too-perfect silence. Then, a sound began under it, like a finger running the rim of a wet glass, subsonic at first, then peaking into a rounded note that wasn't quite a croak, wasn't quite a whistle. The pipes? The AC? Amber held her breath and heard it resolve into 3 pulses, spaced like a pattern. R, 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 A, U, R, 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 A, U, R, 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 A, U. She pushed out into the night. The lobby between the bathrooms had a bulletin board with safety tips, heat advisories, and a sun-faded poster about invasive species. Someone had pinned up a newspaper clipping, edges weather-curled, the headline washed, "Rescue on Tamiami Trail," and a photo of a man in a camo cap holding a bloodied dog. Beneath it, a smaller sheet, missing with 2 school pictures and a phone number. The ink had bled in the humidity until the faces floated like ghosts. Amber's throat tightened. She turned to the big map of Florida, mounted under plexiglass, tracing coastlines with her eyes, until she found the highway, the last exit, the next one. The rest area sat like a tiny green island amid blue ditches and pale marshlands labeled with names that read like warnings. Shark River Slough, Big Cypress. A dotted service road speared off behind the building and ended in nothing, as if the cartographer had run out of nerve. The door opened with a jolt of cool air. She pivoted, pulse spiking. A man stepped in, older, late 50s maybe, with a sun-chapped face and a beard the color of weathered rope. He wore a trucker cap and the kind of reflective vest you bought at a farm store, the striping scuffed with use. He had a coffee in a styrofoam cup and grease on his knuckles. "Evenin'," he said, around a slow smile that was more courtesy than warmth. "Hey," Amber managed. She felt ridiculous for being afraid of an ordinary person. She glanced at the exit as if to prove she could leave any time. The man took a sip, watching her over the rim. His eyes flicked to her damp hair, the keys in her fist, the map. "Lost?" he asked. "Missed an exit," she said. "Phone's dying." He nodded like that's how it went. "Road's tricky at night. Fog sits low off the slough. Folks miss things. Somewhere beyond the building, something heavy shifted in the reeds with a wet slither." The trucker's gaze twitched toward the sound, then back to her, and he lifted his chin slightly, as if testing how much of her fear was going to spill out. "You on your own?" he asked. Amber's mouth opened on no, but the lie caught in her teeth. "My friends are expecting me," she said, instead, which sounded too careful. He took another drink and set the cup on the edge of the brochure rack. "They got gators nesting early this year," he said conversationally. "Cold snap last week confused 'em. Come up close to the culverts, even to the lots, looking for warm concrete." He said it like a warning disguised as small talk. "Don't linger in the dark," she nodded. "I'm just checking the route, then I'm gone." He tapped the map plexi with a yellowed fingernail. "You'll want to go back north 1 mile. Take the 41 split, then east. Don't take the service road." His finger hovered over the dotted line like it carried a charge. "Flooded out. Been that way. Folks see it and think it's a shortcut. It ain't a new sound unspooled through the fog. 3 knocks from nowhere, soft as knuckles on a hollow door." Amber felt it more than heard it. A vibration along the glass, through the soles of her shoes. The trucker cut his eyes toward the dark, and his jaw worked once, muscle bunching like a man resisting the urge to spit. "Best you get," he said, voice thinning. "Stay where the light is." He pushed back out into the night without looking over his shoulder, shoulders hunched against nothing Amber could see. The door sighed shut behind him and left her alone with the map and the old pictures and the buzzing lights. She didn't want to go back outside. She didn't want to stay in either. Both choices felt like stepping onto a stage where the script was already written for her the second she chose. Her phone chimed to tell her it was dying, as if she needed the reminder. She punched the side button anyway and got a last ghost of a map before the screen dimmed. The little blue dot hovered by the rest area, and the dotted service road, like a needle pricked through paper. The battery icon turned red, then black, and the phone went dark with a soft, haptic sigh. There was a payphone bolted to the wall like a relic. A help call button sat under it with a sunburst of scratches. She pressed it. Nothing happened. She picked up the handset and heard the thready ocean of a deadline. She replaced it carefully, like not waking a child. When she stepped back outside, the fog had grown a spine. It moved in bands across the lot, slow as tide, and the lamps haloed it until it looked like a living thing breathing through cloth. Her car waited under the brightest light, with its windows filmed in moisture, her face faintly visible in the driver door, like someone peering back from a parallel world. Between the building and her car, a set of prints stitched the concrete. Wet ovals with splayed toes, as fresh as if laid in ink. They led from the base of the ice machine, around the trash can, and then out of the circle of light, toward the back of the property, toward the chain-link fence, where the marsh pressed its brown mouth to the wire. Amber's scalp prickled in a slow wave. She told herself to get in the car, to lock the doors, to go. Her feet didn't listen. They carried her along the edge of the light, as if the prints themselves tugged a string tied to her ribs. At the fence, the tracks deepened where weight had paused and turned. On the other side, the reeds leaned and righted themselves, damp blades ticking against chain link. Beyond that was only black, and the soft, perpetual conversation of water and things that lived in water. A sign on the fence warned no public access beyond this point and described penalties in small print. Someone had pried up the bottom edge of the mesh enough to make a crawl space, big enough for a teenager, or something that flattened when it moved. Air shifted. The frog song rose again, 3 notes, patient and slow, and nested under it was another noise, the splay and slip of something climbing metal. The fence shuddered once, like a flag in a gust. Ember stepped back. Her heel found nothing. She windmilled, caught herself on the corner of the concrete pad, and almost laughed with the relief of touching anything that wasn't swamp. The laugh died when she saw the smear her hand left, a crescent of mud that glistened and smelled like river rot. Headlights rolled across the lot from the highway, washing the fence in moving light. For 1 second, the mesh threw a shadow as sharp as wire on the fog. And there, 30 feet down the fence line, where the reeds soaked the bottom rungs, something clung. It was turned sideways to her, as if the way a frog is sideways when it climbs glass. A long arm unbent, webbing pulled thin between fingers that weren't fingers, jointed, wrong. It reached to the top rail and paused there, the head lifting. The eye caught the light and blinked sideways with that thin, lidless film. The truck on the highway screamed its horn twice at another truck, and the thing flowed over the rail and into the cattails. Like gravity was a suggestion it could refuse. Amber's breath came back as a small sound. She backed away, keys up, vision tunneling, every instinct in her body suddenly in screaming agreement. Car, now. Something else moved where the chain link ended at the service gate. Human this time, a looming silhouette wearing reflection. The trucker stood in the fog with his hands on the gate's latch, jaw set, eyes tracking the reeds where the thing had gone. He looked at Amber, not surprised to find her there. His mouth shaped words he didn't say aloud. Don't. He swung the latch and shouldered the gate closed. The clink as it caught was tiny, ordinary, final. He looped a chain through and pulled it snug, a gesture as old as farm chores and as fragile as string against storm. I told you, he said, voice low. Don't take the service road. Amber realized in that moment that the dotted line had once been a promise to men like him, and that the swamp had taken that promise back. I'm leaving, she said, and it felt like a vow. Right now? Good, he said. He stared into the reeds, 1 beat longer, like a man memorizing a face, then nodded to himself. Then go. She went. She didn't run. Running would have made noise, and the night felt like a house with a sleeping thing in it that would wake if you rattled the dishes. She slid into the driver's seat, locked the doors, and turned the key with hands that shook. The engine caught. Headlights pushed the fog into 2 pale tunnels. Beyond them, the highway lay like a dark river back toward people, toward places where creatures had names her mouth knew how to say. She pulled out. In the mirror, the trucker's vest hovered like a will-o'-the-wisp as he watched the fence. The croak came again, 3 notes, amused, unhurried, and as Amber's tires touched the on-ramp, something knocked on the roof, once, twice, 3 times, no heavier than a man's hand saying, "I see you." She didn't look back. The highway should have been her salvation. But the farther Amber drove, the more it felt like a tunnel, dug through the night, rather than an escape. The fog still clung to the lowlands on either side, weaving itself in and out of the headlights, so thick that sometimes the beams bounced back and painted her windshield with blinding white. She gripped the wheel tighter, jaw clenched, knuckles pale. The tapping on the roof had stopped, but the memory of it still lingered, a phantom echo inside her skull. Every vibration of the car felt wrong, each rattle from the tires over cracked asphalt, every groan from the suspension, like something crawling over the frame. Amber lowered the window an inch to hear the world outside, needing proof that she was alone. For a moment, all she caught was the heavy drone of cicadas and the endless hum of the swamp at night. Then, splash, a sound carried across the waterlogged air, far too close. It wasn't the harmless plunk of a fish, or even the low roll of a gator sliding into the canal. It was bigger, heavier, a body slamming into water with intent. Amber's throat tightened. She pressed the window button up again and fixed her eyes forward. A green road sign flashed by in the mist. Big Cypress Swamp. Next 5 miles. Her phone, dark and useless in the cup holder, buzzed once, as if in protest. She snatched it up, praying, but the screen only flickered for half a second, showing nothing but static light, before fading again. The fog broke suddenly into a clear stretch, revealing the 2-lane causeway across the wetlands. Pools of black water flanked both sides, stretching flat into the horizon, reflecting only the ghostly light of her headlights. It was like driving through a mirror of the night sky. That was when she saw it. At first it looked like roadkill, sprawled in the middle of the lane, a lump of something slick, twisted, wrong. She eased off the gas, the car gliding forward on momentum. As the beams caught it full on, the shape shifted. A long leg, bent at an impossible angle, flexed. Webbed toes splayed against the asphalt. The thing rose. It didn't scramble or lurch. It unfolded, joint by joint, as if the road itself had birthed it. Its skin was mottled green and brown, shining wet, as if it had just crawled from the canal. Shoulders hunched under the weight of muscle. Arms too long, fingers ending in thick, blunt claws that dripped swamp water. The head tilted. Wide lips peeled back into something that might have been a grin, revealing rows of small, needle-point teeth. Its eyes, gold and glassy, reflected her headlights with a cold, amphibian stillness. Amber's stomach lurched into her chest. She slammed the accelerator. The car surged forward with a scream of tires. The creature didn't move. For a split second, she thought she might hit it head-on, might crush it, and prove it was flesh and blood after all. But in one fluid leap, the Frogman vaulted straight over her hood, its body arching like an impossible shadow. She ducked instinctively, heart hammering, as the roof thudded with its weight. The metal caved slightly above her head, and then it was gone, swallowed by the mist. Amber swerved wildly, fighting the wheel, nearly clipping the guardrail before the car corrected itself. She gasped for air, lungs on fire, and glanced in the rear view. For a heartbeat the fog parted, and she saw it in the lane behind her, crouched low, head cocked, watching her taillights vanish. Its throat swelled. The croak came, deep and guttural, and this time it carried words her brain almost recognized, twisted into the sound. Amber! She tore her eyes from the mirror, slammed her foot harder to the floor, and whispered to herself, "Don't stop, don't stop, don't stop." The mist thickened again, sealing the thing away, but the echo of her name lingered, a wet growl woven into the pulse of her own heartbeat. Amber's sedan shuddered as she tore down the causeway, tires singing against the wet asphalt. The world became a blur of headlights and fog, the swamp stretching endlessly on both sides, its black waters reflecting nothing but void. Her knuckles were white on the wheel, tendons straining, every muscle in her body screaming with adrenaline. She thought she'd left it behind. She thought the leap, the weight on the roof, the guttural echo of her name was the worst she would endure. But then, bang! The car jolted hard to the right. Something slammed against the rear quarter panel, a force too powerful to be debris or wind. Amber fought the wheel, correcting, but the vehicle fishtailed. Her headlights caught nothing but mist and the narrow line of guardrail inches from the plunge into swamp. Then came the dragging, a sound like wet claws raking against metal, a scraping hiss that traveled along the side of the car. She screamed and floored the accelerator, but the noise only grew louder. Something clung to her, matching her speed. God, no, no, no! A shadow swung across her windshield. The frogman's face pressed against the glass, lips split wide, skin stretched slick over bone. The mouth opened in a grotesque parody of laughter, and water dripped from its teeth as it mouthed her name again. Amber swerved, desperate to shake it loose. The car bounced, tires catching the edge of the road. For a moment, she felt weightless, like the entire vehicle might flip into the canal. But the guardrail held her back. The impact rang through her bones. She snapped her gaze forward, just in time to see the road curve sharply. She yanked the wheel, but the frogman acted first. With a single blow, it smashed its fist into the windshield. Spider web cracks exploded across the glass. Amber cried out, shards raining onto the dash. Her control was gone. The sedan spun, tires shrieking against the slick surface, and with a final wrenching twist, it slammed nose first into the guardrail. Metal screamed. The airbag exploded into her chest with brutal force, knocking the breath from her lungs. Pain flashed white in her vision. The world slowed. Amber coughed, tasted copper, blinked through tears. The car was dead, steam curling from under the hood. Her ears rang, every sound muffled, except one. Splash. Heavy, close. The passenger door wrenched outward with a screech of bending hinges. A hand, webbed, glistening, impossibly strong, thrust inside. The claws hooked her arm before she could recoil. Amber shrieked, thrashing, pounding her fists against the dashboard, the seatbelt locking her in place like a trap. The frogman leaned in, its bulk filling the cab, eyes burning like lanterns in the dark. Its breath was swamp rot, suffocating, as it dragged her toward the open door. "No, let me go. Help! Her voice shredded against the night. The belt cut into her chest as she kicked wildly, nails breaking on slick skin that didn't yield. With one final jerk, the monster snapped the strap as if it were thread. Amber was yanked from the wreckage, her body colliding against its chest, the world spinning in chaos around her. The swamp swallowed her scream. Her last glimpse of the highway was the wrecked sedan, hazard lights blinking weakly in the fog, like a fading distress beacon. Then the creature bounded from the pavement in a single arc, plunging with her into the reeking black water. The canal closed over their heads. The world went silent. The water was a coffin, cold and viscous. It wrapped around Amber in an instant, flooding her ears, her nose, her mouth. The shock burned through her lungs as she kicked and thrashed, desperate for air. But the creature's grip was iron. Its webbed hand locked across her ribs, dragging her down as easily as if she weighed nothing at all. The swamp swallowed the world above. Headlights from her ruined car shimmered faintly through the surface, two ghostly eyes that blurred and shrank until they vanished completely. Darkness closed in. The only sound was her own heartbeat, thunderous in her head, and the glub, glub, glub of bubbles tearing loose from her lips. Her body screamed for air. Instinct clawed at her to inhale, even if it meant drowning. She twisted violently, fingernails tearing against the frogman's slick hide. It didn't flinch. Its head turned toward her as they sank, eyes glowing faintly gold in the black water, unblinking. Its throat pulsed, expanding with each croak, the vibrations rumbling through her bones, even underwater. Brrrr. It wasn't a sound meant for water or air. It was something older. A command. Amber's vision began to sparkle at the edges. Panic and lack of oxygen blurred her thoughts, but survival screamed louder. She clawed at the monster's grip, kicked against it, and in her frenzy, her hand brushed something sharp at her hip, her car keys still clenched in her fist. With the last of her strength, she jabbed them into the frogman's throat. The response was instant. The creature convulsed, bubbles erupting in a furious storm. Its grip loosened just enough for her to wrench free. She shot upward, lungs blazing, arms cutting the water. Her chest convulsed as her head broke the surface. She inhaled a ragged, desperate breath of swamp air, thick with the stench of algae and decay. But freedom was brief. A splash erupted behind her, a wall of water, as the frogman breached. It let out a guttural roar that echoed through the cypress trees, a sound part croak, part scream. The swamp itself seemed to shiver. Amber flailed toward the shore. Roots tangled in the shallows, gnarled and sharp. She clawed at them, hauling herself out of the water, coughing, gagging, spitting bile and swamp. Mud sucked at her legs as she scrambled up onto the bank. Behind her, the frogman pulled itself from the canal. Its massive frame rose in stages, first the dripping head, then the hulking shoulders, then its arms, water cascading from its claws. It stood half in, half out of the swamp, a grotesque silhouette framed by moonlight and fog. Steam rose off its body, as if the very air recoiled from its heat. Its mouth opened wide, lips splitting back, revealing rows of jagged teeth. Amber staggered backward into the trees. Branches clawed her skin, Spanish moss brushed her face, and the stink of rot grew thicker the deeper she stumbled. She didn't care. Anywhere was better than the water. The creature followed. Its gait was wrong, too springy, too precise. Each step carried a weight that made the mud tremble. It didn't rush. It didn't have to. Every motion told her it was patient, deliberate, certain that she could not escape. She crashed through the undergrowth, blind with terror, until her foot caught in a root and she went sprawling. Pain flared in her ankle. She bit back a cry and scrambled upright. Ahead, through the trees, she glimpsed something unnatural, a dim orange flicker, firelight. Her heart leapt. Someone was out here. She limped toward it, crashing through the brush. The flicker grew into the shape of a lantern hanging from a branch, its flame guttering weakly. Beneath it sat a shack, rotten planks, half collapsed, roof sagging under moss. The door hung open, revealing darkness that smelled of mold and old water. Amber hesitated only a second. Behind her, reeds snapped. Heavy footsteps sank into mud. She ran inside. The shack groaned around her. Moonlight pierced the gaps in the walls, slicing the dark into stripes. Piles of bones littered the floor, some animal, some human, impossible to tell which. Jars lined a warped shelf, filled with murky liquid that glistened with preserved shapes she couldn't bear to identify. The air was suffocating, thick with mildew and something coppery. Blood, old and dried. And then she saw it, scratched into the far wall, carved deep with claws or knives, were crude symbols, circles intersected with jagged lines, shapes that looked like eyes, mouths, and amphibian figures. A pattern repeated over and over, surrounding a larger etching in the center, a woman's form, bound. Amber's stomach turned to ice. A shadow filled the doorway. The frogman crouched low, its bulk forcing it sideways through the frame. Its eyes burned brighter in the gloom, locking onto her. Its throat ballooned again, and this time the croak came out clear, unmistakable, words dragged from a throat not meant to speak. Mine. Amber backed into the wall, heart pounding so hard it hurt, surrounded by symbols, bones, and darkness. The door closed behind the creature with a sound like the world sealing shut. Amber didn't remember falling asleep. Exhaustion had dragged her down into a shallow, shivering half-dream where swamp sounds twisted into voices whispering her name. When she startled awake, the shack was dark, except for slivers of moonlight piercing the rotten walls. The lantern outside had gone out. The frogman was gone. She sat up slowly, every muscle trembling, listening. Nothing but the buzz of insects and the faint drip of water. Her arms still bore bruises where its claws had clamped her. Her ankle throbbed, swollen from the fall, but adrenaline overrode pain. This was her chance. She pushed herself to her feet and scanned the shack for anything she could use. A rusted knife lay among the bones, its handle wrapped in damp leather. She grabbed it, the blade rough with corrosion but still sharp at the edge. Her other hand found a shard of broken glass, jagged and mean. She stuffed it into her pocket. Her breath came fast. Quiet, she told herself. Move quiet. Amber slipped toward the door. The hinges groaned as she nudged it open, a sound too loud in the stillness. She froze, heart hammering, but nothing stirred outside. The swamp lay pale in the moonlight, mist curling like fingers over the ground. She stepped into the night. The air was heavy, hot, buzzing with life. Frogs croaked from the water's edge, their calls overlapping into a chorus that made her skin crawl. Each one sounded almost mocking. She limped toward the tree line, knife clenched in her fist, scanning for a path. And then she saw them. Prints. Fresh, wet ovals in the mud. Toes splayed, claws gouged deep. They led away from the shack, toward the thicker swamp. The frogman had gone hunting. Or patrolling. Her stomach knotted. If he returned and found her gone? She pushed forward faster, pain screaming in her ankle. Each step sank into mud that sucked at her shoes, trying to drag her down. Mosquitoes swarmed her face. Branches clawed her arms. She didn't care. Every sound behind her felt like pursuit. A low croak echoed in the distance. She froze. It wasn't far. Amber veered left, deeper into the cypress grove, trying to muffle her steps on patches of roots instead of mud. Spanish moss hung low, brushing her hair like cold fingers. She ducked under, heart pounding in her throat. The croak came again, closer, louder. She stumbled, catching herself on a trunk, and her hand closed around something nailed to the bark. Her eyes adjusted to the moonlight. It was a sign, a hunting marker. Faded paint spelled out numbers. People had been here. Hunters. There had to be a trail nearby. Her pulse surged with hope. She followed the trees, searching, until she found the faint outline of boards, an old footbridge, half sunken in the swamp. It sagged under her weight, but held. If she followed it, maybe it would lead out. She was halfway across when the water below rippled. Amber froze. The ripples grew, spreading wider, circling the bridge. Then a hand erupted from the black, webbed fingers, locking around the planks. Another followed. Water poured off its shoulders as the frogman rose silently beneath her, eyes glimmering gold. Her scream stuck in her throat. It pulled itself up onto the boards, the wood bowing under its weight. Amber staggered back, knife raised, legs trembling. The creature's throat swelled, croak rolling out like thunder. Its mouth twisted into something like a smile. No escape. Amber slashed wildly with the knife. The blade tore across its arm, shallow but real. Black ichor oozed. The frogman recoiled, hissing, then lunged. The bridge cracked under the impact. Amber dove sideways, crashing into the mud at the edge of the swamp. Pain jolted through her body, but she scrambled on hands and knees, pulling herself into the reeds. The monster tore through the planks behind her, snarling, thrashing. She ran, blind, branches tearing her face, until she burst into a clearing where the swamp opened wide. And there, dim but real, she saw a cabin on stilts, a lantern glowing faintly inside. A human voice carried across the water. "Oh, who's there?" Amber's chest broke with relief. She staggered toward the sound, waving frantically. "Help! Please, he's coming!" Behind her, the swamp erupted with a roar. The frogman was not finished. Amber's cry echoed across the clearing, torn from her throat with desperation. The lantern light in the stilted cabin bobbed, and a silhouette moved against the glow, broad-shouldered, carrying a rifle. "Keep moving," a man's voice barked, deep and urgent. Amber stumbled forward, every step a fight against the sucking mud. Her ankle screamed, but fear numbed the pain. Behind her, the swamp exploded. The frogman surged from the reeds in a spray of water and muck. Its roar was part croak, part scream, shaking the cypress branches overhead. The lantern's light caught it fully for the first time. Its mottled skin gleamed like polished leather, webbing stretched between elongated fingers tipped with claws. Its belly swollen and pulsing with every breath. Its eyes burned gold. "Down!" the man shouted. A shot cracked through the night. The muzzle flash lit the clearing like lightning. The round struck the frogman in the shoulder, jerking it sideways. It bellowed, staggering, ichor spraying black across the mud. For a heartbeat, Amber dared to believe it might fall. It didn't. The monster steadied itself and fixed its gaze on the cabin, throat swelling with a resonant growl that made Amber's teeth ache. With terrifying speed, it bounded toward her again, each leap covering yards of swamp like nothing weighed it down. Amber threw herself flat as another shot rang. The bullet punched into the creature's side, but instead of dropping, it twisted and leapt. In one horrifying arc, it cleared the last stretch of swamp and landed so close that Amber felt the ground quake. She scrambled back, choking on mud, as claws slashed where her head had been. The frogman croaked, a low, guttural sound that almost formed words. "Mine." Another blast shattered the air. This time, the bullet grazed the side of its skull, spraying ichor and shards of scale. The monster recoiled, shrieking, then swung its massive arm. The force knocked Amber sideways, and she hit the ground hard, vision blurring. The man with the rifle shouted again, but his words were muffled through the ringing in her ears. She blinked, vision swimming, and saw him leap from the cabin steps, boots sinking into mud as he advanced, reloading with steady hands. His eyes never left the frogman. Amber forced herself up, heart hammering. She crawled toward the cabin, dragging herself on elbows and knees. Every inch forward was a battle, but the promise of safety, of light, pulled her on. Behind her, the frogman roared and charged the man. The swamp erupted into chaos. The thunder of gunfire, the hiss of water, the wet smack of fists against flesh. The man's curses mixed with the monster's croaks. Amber staggered to her feet and half ran, half fell up the cabin steps. She slammed the door behind her, bolting it with shaking hands. Inside, the lantern cast a trembling glow over wooden walls lined with nets, traps, and tools. The place smelled of smoke and salt. Through the cracks in the planks, she glimpsed the battle outside, the hunter firing, the frogman ducking and weaving unnaturally fast, its claws raking trees, splinters flying. Each time it took a hit, it only seemed angrier, more determined. The croak rolled again, deep and hateful. "No, escape!" The hunter shouted something, then the fight shifted out of sight. For a terrifying moment, there was silence. Amber clutched a lantern in one hand and the rusted knife in the other, her body trembling. She barely had time to breathe before a heavy thud landed on the roof. Dust rained down from the beams. The wood creaked under immense weight. Her eyes went wide. The frogman was above her. The roof groaned. Each step the frogman took, above Amber, pressed the beams low, dust raining down in slow cascades. She held the lantern high, the rusted knife trembling in her grip. Every instinct screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. The cabin was a box, and the monster was already breaking in. A claw punched through the ceiling. Splinters flew. Amber shrieked as the hand groped blindly, webbing stretched, claws raking air. Another blow followed, tearing a gap wide enough for moonlight to pour through. The hunter's voice bellowed outside. "Get out, girl. Out." A blast of gunfire split the night, shaking the walls. The frogman roared, a guttural, wet sound that vibrated through Amber's ribs. The roof sagged, but the pressure lifted. The monster had leapt away. Amber bolted. She unlatched the door and stumbled into the night. The clearing was chaos. Fog torn by muzzle flashes, swamp water splashed high in sheets as the frogman bounded between trees and shadows. The hunter fired again and again, each round tearing into the beast, but it refused to fall. Black ichor streaked its chest, glistening in the lantern glow. "Run to the lake," the hunter roared. "Move," Amber obeyed. She limped through the mud, lungs burning, every step pulling her closer to the open water, shimmering through the mist. Behind her, the swamp rang with gunfire, screams, and the monstrous croak that seemed to echo from every tree. She broke through the reeds and stumbled onto the lake's edge. The surface lay smooth as glass, moonlight trembling across it. Cypress trees stood like sentinels at the perimeter, their roots gnarled and black. For one heartbeat, it was silent, as if the world itself had paused. Then the hunter crashed out of the brush, blood on his temple, rifle hanging useless from shattered wood. He staggered toward her. "It's not stoppin'," he gasped. "We gotta end it here." The frogman followed. It burst from the tree line, massive, hunched, each step sending shock waves through the mud. Its throat ballooned, croaks swelling into a thunderous bellow that rolled across the water. The sound made Amber's knees buckle. The hunter grabbed her arm, dragging her upright. "The lantern. Use the fire." Amber clutched the glass lamp to her chest. The flame flickered, small and fragile, against the hulking shadow, advancing toward them. She wanted to scream that it wasn't enough, that nothing could stop this thing. But there was no time for doubt. The frogman lunged. Amber hurled the lantern. It smashed against the creature's chest, fire erupting in a sudden blossom of orange. For the first time, the monster recoiled, its croak warping into a howl of pain. Flames clung to its slick skin, sizzling as swamp water dripped from its body. "Now!" the hunter roared. He tackled the frogman, driving it backward into the lake. Fire and water collided, steam hissing into a thick white cloud. The beast thrashed, sending waves crashing against the shore. Amber stumbled back, mud sucking at her feet, as the two figures vanished into the boiling mist. For a terrible moment, silence, only the ripple of disturbed water. Then a shape surged up, not the hunter, the frogman, erupted from the lake. Flames extinguished, half its face charred, but its eyes still burning gold. It roared, jaws wide, teeth glistening. Amber screamed. She raised the rusted knife, last weapon in her hand, though she knew it was useless. The creature stepped onto the shore, and then staggered. A blade jutted from its throat. The hunter's knife. He surfaced behind it, drenched, gasping, driving the weapon deeper with both hands. The frogman convulsed, croak breaking into a strangled gurgle. Its arms flailed wide, claws slashing at the air. With one final monstrous bellow, it collapsed into the lake. The water swallowed it whole, ripples spiraling out across the surface. The hunter fell to his knees on the shore, chest heaving, blood mixing with mud. Amber dropped beside him, sobbing. "Is it dead?" The hunter stared at the water, jaw tight. The ripples slowed, fading into stillness. "I don't reckon anything that old ever truly dies," he muttered. "But it'll stay down." For now Amber clutched his arm, trembling. The night was eerily quiet again. The swamp hummed with insects, as though nothing had happened. The moon hung cold and distant above them. From the far side of the lake, faint and low, came a sound. Up. Amber's blood turned to ice. The hunter's grip tightened on his broken rifle. "We need to leave," he said. "Now." Together, limping and exhausted, they staggered back toward the faint glow of the highway. The swamp watching with its endless golden eyes. The lake behind them went still, but in the water, deep below, something stirred.